West, we tend to think of the mind and heart as separate, as two different entities. And in Eastern philosophy, mind and heart has always been one. And in the mindfulness teachings and in the Buddhist teachings, mind and heart is one. It's where the wisdom arises. And also, I call it heart, and heart is included in the mind, so that we don't think in binary terms, that we don't get dualistic and think that the mind is separate from the heart. In the book, Detox Your Heart, Meditations for Emotional Trauma, I really begin with a dialogue between the mind and the heart, and how the mind has pushed the heart out. And this is what happens. I really do believe that when we are in conflict, the mind pushes the heart out, compassion goes out of the window. And for us to have compassion, mind, heart has to come back to its stasis, its place as one. I really love the teachings within Buddhism. In Buddhism and in the mindfulness teachings, we speak of only three feelings. There are only three feelings, and feelings are hedonic tone. So feeling is what you feel in the body. And what we say is that the three classifications, pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. So in a way, if you have feeling, are you feeling unpleasant, pleasant, or neutral? So right now, you have your legs crossed. And if you really tune in to your legs being crossed, I would say that actually there's some slight unpleasantness, yeah? Just some slight discomfort. And we can go into another part of the body. It might just be with our hands resting on our lap, and you know, the touch of our hands on the body, we may experience this as pleasant. And sometimes we experience things as neutral, nothing much going on. And it's really important to have this language of feelings, because feelings are the things that trigger reactivity. Feelings are the things that trigger what many people call, and what I call, this stinking thinking. And feelings can actually create emotions. So for me, emotions are very different from feelings. Often people say, I feel abandoned. Now, abandoned isn't an emotion, and abandonment can create an emotion. And when we say, I feel abandoned, that's not a feeling, it's a story, it's a perception, it's an interpretation, it's somebody's experience. If we were to go into what are you feeling? Okay, you say you're feeling abandoned, but this isn't exactly a feeling. This is a story, this is your experience. What are you actually feeling? And inevitably, when we inquire into this story, that person will begin to connect to the unpleasant sensations, and have made those unpleasant sensations mean abandonment. And when we go into the story of abandonment, this can create an emotion of resentment, it can create an emotion of anger, it can create an emotion of irritation or emotion of happiness. So for me, emotions and feelings are very, very different. And in between feelings and emotions, we have this interpretation. These interpretations often stir up these emotions. And when we become literate in this, we have more freedom. We have more freedom in life. We are aware of what's happening. We're able to step back a bit and not get so activated. It's freedom when we really begin to understand these simple teachings. It's just interesting when you said I have the feeling, that I get very confused. And again, that confused it isn't a feeling, it's an interpretation of what's going on. So in answer to your question, I would say for myself, when I became aware of, oh my God, only 3 feelings. When I first wrote the first edition of Detox Your Heart, I had so many feelings, yeah. And actually, when I really began to understand this teaching of pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, I would begin to ask myself, what's going on right now? Is this pleasant? Is this unpleasant? So in a way, it's beginning to practice, ask yourself what's going on. And actually, at the end of the day, when you actually say, it's really important, how do we know if we're angry, if we're happy, if we're irritated, there's confusion? I would say that actually, when we think of emotions is energy. This is energy in the body. Because I could actually say to somebody, what are the feelings that you have when you're experiencing the emotion of anger? And people can say, their heart beating, they're out of breath, they're sweaty, perhaps even experiencing some dizziness. And then I might actually say to you, well, what are the feelings and sensations you experience when you have the emotion of being in love? And again, person could say, well, the heart is beating, the heart, I feel sweaty, there's a dizziness. So in a way, emotions for me is this energy, this charge of energy. In fact, when I think of ego, the word ego in English, EGO, I love playing with acronyms. I say that ego stands for energy gone overboard, because emotions, if we didn't have all this charged emotions, then we wouldn't have these heightened emotions like anger and frustration. Sometimes we talk about that flat effect when somebody has no energy. So in a way, really, the most important thing is rather than wondering what emotions do I have right now, the teaching is, what am I feeling right now in the body? How can I come home to the body? Because many people have left the body. Nobody's home. All sense doors are being closed down because they don't want to feel, because feeling is scary. And really, it's like, how can we come back home to the body and really begin to be in touch with the body? Because the body will alert us that we are experiencing vulnerability. The body will alert us that we are at risk. And just to finish this off, that actually we can be so out of touch of our bodies that we don't listen to what's going on in our bodies. Many people will say, people who have been attacked or assaulted, they had a really weird feeling in their body sensation, but they didn't listen to it, they didn't understand it. And for me, this is really important, that if we have a strange, weird feeling, sensation in our body, listen to it. It may not mean something is going to happen, but what it does mean is that actually you're just feeling slightly vulnerable. And actually you need to listen to that and take care of yourself. I like to slow the process down of what can happen in the mind in seconds. We know that we can be activated, and in seconds we can be acting out. And how did we get there? Sometimes it's like, oh my God, how did I lose it? And it just happens so quickly. And if we slow it down, I work with this model, what I call the vicious circle of addiction, or it can be the vicious circle of conflict. And what is happening is that we have five sense doors, or six. The mind is a sense door as well. So we have 6 sense doors. When one of the sense doors come into contact with an external stimulus or an internal stimulus, there's going to be feeling. So for example, let's use an addiction model. For example, somebody perhaps who is struggling with alcohol, and they walk into a restaurant and they smell alcohol. So the nose has had contact with the smell of alcohol. Maybe the eye has had contact with the smell of alcohol. And whenever there is contact, there is feeling. Okay, you can't avoid it. You cannot avoid feeling. So whenever there's contact, there's going to be feeling. For the person perhaps who is struggling with the alcohol, smells the alcohol, and maybe it could be a pleasant sensation that arises. Yeah, it's feeling in the body. You don't know, it could be in the stomach. And then from that pleasant sensation, the thought might be, I'd love a drink. Yeah. And then the rumination begins. Oh, I deserve a drink. Yeah. Maybe I need a drink. And then the emotion, excitement arises. So the emotion of excitement arises, and then there could be more thinking, and the next thing, the person has picked up and had the drink. And that can happen in seconds. Person not even thinking, the person, it overrides that actually they weren't going to drink anymore. And the same thing can actually happen if somebody is really activated. Maybe somebody is in a conversation with somebody and they hear something. So they through the contact through the ear and through looking at the person, an unpleasant sensation arises in the body. It's unpleasant. A thought arises, I don't like this person. The next thing, it's like, this person is making me angry, I don't want this person near me. And the emotion, anger has manifested, and the next minute they're acting out, shouting, screaming, or even hitting and punching. And this can happen in seconds, you know. And there's another model that I like to use in the English language. We talk fact, interpretation, decision, outcome. So often what happens is when we're activated, when we're triggered, the fact has gone out of the window. We're not even aware of the fact. We're in the interpretation. So it may be that we are walking along the street and we say hello to somebody and the person keeps on walking. We're in the interpretation, that person doesn't like me. Why didn't that person say hello to me? And based on that, based on that interpretation, they make a decision and they send them a really angry text. You know, why the hell didn't you say hello to me? I'm really upset, or I'm really annoyed, I'm really angry. And the outcome is that the friend stopped speaking. However, if the person was able to pause and actually went to the fact, the fact simply is, you said hello and the person carried on walking. Okay, that's all. And if we go with that fact, we could perhaps make a different interpretation. Maybe the person didn't see me. Maybe the person didn't hear me. And maybe then the decision is to send a text, hey, I just saw you, what's going on? And the outcome is that you don't end up fighting with your friend. Definitely, if we become aware of these different stages, coming back to the vicious circle or the vicious cycle of conflict or addiction, what we're looking at is, how can we step out of the reactivity? How can we step off this cycle? How can we slow it down? Often people are wanting to bypass feeling. People don't want to feel. People want to escape feeling. They want to bypass it. And actually, if we could just accept that there is going to be feeling, and feeling really is okay. But for many people, feeling is scary, and people just don't want to feel because people think if they start feeling, they won't even be able to get out of bed in the morning. You know, if they start feeling, it may actually re-traumatize them about certain things that happened to them in childhood. And yet, at the end of the day, the freedom is coming back to the body. And what I would say is that definitely, even if we get round to thoughts, we could just say, it's just a thought. And if we get stuck in thinking, we can tell ourselves, the only place this is happening is in my head. It's not happening anywhere else. It's happening in the head. And if we could just tell ourselves that, you know, and if we are in emotions, you know, it's just like, okay, vulnerability, I just need to take care of myself. Perhaps I need to take myself out of this situation. And if we go into, and if we act out, we notice, then we just think, well, maybe next time I can do it differently. I'm smiling because today I say meditation is my Prozac. I've never taken Prozac, and I'm very fortunate that I've never had to take antidepressants. I really do believe that actually, if meditation hadn't come into my life, I would have had to have taken antidepressants. I can remember I was an extreme bulimic, and I can remember the doctor, I was about 19, and a doctor writing me a prescription for antidepressants, and I ripped them up because for me it was like, well, I'm a bulimic, I'm not going to keep these pills down, what's the point, you know? Maybe they would have helped, I don't know if they would have helped or not. And what I would say is, because meditation has been in my life for over 30 years, that actually definitely new pathways in the brain have developed, and also that meditation has definitely regulated my central nervous system. You know, often so many of us are walking around with the nervous system being completely out of whack, the parasympathetic nerve being completely out of whack. I got into meditation, and I'm smiling, is because I think actually I do say in Detox Your Heart, I really needed a change in my life. I could really feel on a sensate level that the composition of my brain was changing because of all the recreational abuse that I had done. And I would say, like, I was one of those people where when I started meditating, I got so high. It was like, it was like this amazing drug, and I would trip. It was a bit like this thing. I got so high, it didn't cost anything, it wasn't illegal, it didn't take up any space in my luggage. I always remember during the millennium, you know, I kind of, my young adult life was on the rave scene, and all my mates are like, I'm going to this party and this party over the millennium, all the parties that they were going to over the millennium. And I'm like, forget it, I'm going on retreat. I went on 3 weeks retreat because I knew that I was going to have such blissful and altered state experiences. And so for me, meditation allowed me to experience joy and a happiness that I'd never experienced before in my life. You know, I had quite a disturbed childhood. I wasn't aware of it at the time, but as older, I realized that, and actually to experience such joy and bliss, I was sold. And for me, meditation is something different now. I don't meditate just because I want to get high. I meditate because I really want to see things as they really are. I really want to wake up to reality. I really want to be able to live in a world where I am in touch with things as they really are and not how I want them to be. Often the average person is in conflict with reality. Basically, they cannot actually accept reality, and they're wanting things to be different. They're wishing things didn't happen, and they're wanting things to be different. And so I would say that meditation is a birthright, and that we all have the capacity to meditate. Even animals, that stillness, that's something of stillness, and meditation is everything that we do. You know, for me, it's like how I can bring more meditative states into everything that I do. This is a very big topic, really exploring the meditation and the nervous system. Firstly, what I want to say is that as humans, we're not separate from our environment. I would say that actually one of the reasons why we have so much war, so much conflict in the world is because people see themselves as separate and other. The reason why we're struggling with climate change is because people see themselves separate from the earth, separate from the elements, and we're not separate. My late teacher, Sangharachita, says that we are condensed lumps of energy. Okay, so if you think that we are these condensed lumps of energy, these breathing energy, we are going to be impacted by our environment. And what we have to look at, if you think of how the Industrial Revolution impacted the lifestyles and the way people lived, which was this thing of clocking in and clocking out. You know, if you think of the watch, you know, how long have we had the watch? Time, how time, you got to get to places on time. This really has an impact on the nervous system. Now we're going through, you know, the technological revolution, and things are just, we are just so bombarded with all this information. Even children, I believe that children have lost the wonder in the world because they have access to everything now. Yet at one point there were things that, you know, as a child you would know, and as you got older you would get to know other things. But now it's just all out there on the world and on the internet. And as soon as kids can have that freedom of messing around on the internet, they're being bombarded with all this information, which has an impact on the nervous system. We know, like anxiety, depression, if we think of things like ADHD, and we think of things like Asperger's, we think of on the spectrum, that has escalated. Why has it escalated? When we ask why has it escalated, we have to look at what's happening in the environment, because our environment creates us. You know, it's like the conditions that we grow up in. The conditions that we're growing up in today here in the West really is putting the nervous system out of whack. I can't imagine what it would be like for people having to grow up in a war zone. I can't imagine what it would be like at the moment for if you lived in the US and you're a parent and you have children and wondering, are your children going to come home alive? Yeah. Or if you are a black parent, again, in the US, in Canada, in England, again, wondering, is your child going to come home alive? And in a way, you know, again, meditation is one of those things to help calm the nervous system. Just like people might go running to help calm the nervous system. People do yoga to help calm the nervous system. People do singing and dancing to help calm the nervous system. And actually, if you think about it, before the technological revolution, before the industrial revolution, before, people lived far more simpler lives, you know? And I'm not saying that people didn't have anxiety, but people, you know, if we go back to, I don't want to say primitive times, but once upon a time, it's people were perhaps worried, perhaps if an animal was going to kill them, you know? Whereas now, we're worried about whether the two-legged animal is going to kill us. Where I live, it's interesting, where I live in Canada, I have to be concerned about bears, but I'm telling you, my nervous system is so much more calmer in Canada than it is in London, because I've got more risk of being attacked by a two-legged animal than I have of a four-legged animal. Okay, and what I would say is meditation really it slows us down. It doesn't make us slower, but it helps us to become aware of what is happening in our system. And I don't know how meditation works, but all I can say is it definitely regulates the nervous system. It definitely calms the nervous system. What I will also say is that actually meditation, what can happen is that actually it can really activate the nervous system as well, because when we sit to meditate, sometimes what happens is things from the unconscious begin to arise, which is why some people don't want to meditate. Because if they sit down to meditate, things that they have tried to suppress, tried to keep out of their life, begins to arise, and they don't want to turn towards that. This is what they've been trying to block out. So in a way, again, meditation really helps us to come face to face to some of the things that have been driving our life. People aren't aware that when we suppress stuff, that actually those things are driving our life. And people aren't aware of that, which is why it's so important to really kind of unearth some of these things that are happening that we've been suppressing in the unconscious. Well, as I say, we come into the world with a breath of inspiration, and we leave the world with a breath of expiration. And in between, our job is to keep on breathing. And in my next book that will be published next year, it's called a First Aid Kit for the Mind. I really talk about the importance of breathing, because what happens is that when we get agitated, for instance, if we're driving and somebody cuts across us, we hold on to the breath, and the next minute we're screaming at the person. And I call this is like temporary brain damage. When people get really angry, they're not breathing fully in the body. And I call this temporary brain damage, because we know that if the brain doesn't get enough oxygen, there will be brain damage. And I really do believe that actually when we get angry, when we get frustrated, we actually have temporary brain damage, because the flow of the breath isn't oxygenating the whole body. So breathing, of course it's important. It's the one thing that we do 24/7. We're just not even aware of the breath. I'm asking you, are you aware of the touch of the breath? Every moment in that breath, there is a sensation on the upper lip. And if you really slow down, you'll really become aware of these subtle sensations of the breath. And actually, for me, this is a really important teaching, because often we are interested in the big experience. We want the big experience, and we ignore the small experiences. And coming in touch with the subtle experiences of the breath teaches us to acknowledge and to have gratitude for those small experiences. I also want to say that actually the Buddha, the recent Buddha, taught the practice, the anapanasati, which is the mindfulness of breathing. And it's a very interesting practice because it's 16 stages, 4 tetrads. And basically in the first tetrad, we are learning to breathe through the experience of the body. Yeah? The second tetrad, we're learning to breathe through the experience of feelings and sensations. And in that third tetrad, we're learning to breathe through the experience of the cognition, of the thoughts, of the thinking, the mind making. And then the fourth tetrad, it's called, we're learning to breathe through the experience of the dharmas, of the teachings, learning to breathe through the experience, what I like to call, of aging, death and sickness. But we're learning to breathe through the experience of impermanence, which basically marks out our human life. We have this body, we are feeling beings, we are thinking beings, and we are beings which are full of impermanence. I mean, our body is changing all the time. We're aging all the time, and our body is decaying all the time, and at some point we will be no longer. Yeah. And so in a way, breathing really teaches us to come into relationship, which I consider to be the most important things in life. And yet, as we know, the most important things in life for people is having a house, is having a car, is having a job, is having a designer clothes, is having all these external things, because we think that these things will make us happy. And of course, we do need a certain amount of material things, because we live in a world where we need money to be able to buy stuff, to be able to survive. And yet, really, some of the happiest people are the people who have very little and who are very much in touch with the experience of the body, with the experience of the feelings, of the experience of cognition, of the experience of sickness, ages, and death, of the experience of impermanence. I'm smiling because one of the things I say to people sometimes, I say, find a picture of you when you was 5 years old and look at yourself now. Tell me, have you changed? Okay. So in a way, it's like that there staring in your face is just showing how we have changed. We forget that we have changed. We forget that that things are always changing. One of the practices I talk about in this book is a practice of flowers. It's a practice that I've been doing for many years, is buying a vase of flowers, buying flowers, because in a way, I really see us as humans like flowers, because as humans, we are cut from the cord, from the umbilical cord. We're cut from the umbilical cord, and then we begin to grow, we age, and we wither and die. And some people die very early on in life, and some people get to be old and wizened. And that's the same as flowers. Flowers are cut from the source, and you put them in a vase, and some of them kill over really quickly, and some of them last for a very long while. You know, they dry up, and they're dried, and they're old and wizened. And really, for me, that is a great practice of impermanence. And it's a good question that you ask, because, you know, for some people we can get quite nihilistic around this. But for me, I just think I am so glad that I have aged. Oh my God, when I think of what it was like in my 20s, oh my God, I was a shipwreck. I'm so glad that I have aged and that I do have more wisdom. I really do appreciate that. And actually, in a way, I just think that it is hard, but there is a joy that it's part of life, and there is a joy in aging, and there can also be a joy in sickness. You know, the reality is it's going to happen to all of us. I can't really say the best way to connect with this, but what I do want to say is that actually it is inevitable. It's inevitable that we're going to age and that we're going to get sick, and we're going to die. And I, for myself, remind myself of that because I think one of the joys of reminding myself of that is actually realizing that I don't know how much time I have left. And so hopefully when that time comes, I won't be so resentful. You know, we can be really resentful. We can be, and I can remember that. 25 or so years ago, I can't remember what it was, but I had this thing and I was really resentful. It's like, I shouldn't get sick. I shouldn't, you know? And that, in a way, is creating that extra suffering. So in a way, what I want to say is that accepting the reality that we're going to age and that we're going to get sick is painful. And there can be a joy in that, but actually it can become more painful if we resent it, if we resist it. Yeah, become more painful. Yeah, I think there is different types of wisdom. I think children can have wisdom. Yeah, I would say there's one type of wisdom where age gives you wisdom because you've lived longer, you've seen more things. The wisdom, to me, which is really important, is the wisdom where compassion and kindness and mindfulness, that to me is a wisdom. If we can be compassionate to ourselves, then that is a wisdom. And so many of us are unable to be compassionate towards ourselves. I think what's been really interesting, if we think about the mindfulness world, that actually we have the mindfulness and it's all about the breathing and it's a breath, and then what came after mindfulness was this compassion, because compassion was missing, you know, and compassion is really, really important. And also as well, that wisdom, we see mindfulness, we see compassion, and then we have to look at the ontological, and that ontological is the insight. So we have the mindfulness, we have the compassion, we have the insight of seeing things as they really are. And that to me is the cherry on the cake, if we can really see things as they really are. So for me, there are different types of wisdom. There is the wisdom, as I said, in terms of age, that people have lived and seen things. There is the wisdom that children can be very wise. They can look up to the adult and actually tell the adult what you're doing is wrong. It doesn't make sense. Yeah, children do have a knowing. In fact, I would say that unfortunately parenting actually gets rid of the wisdom in children, actually, because children stop believing themselves. Children lose that confidence. Children stop talking. Yeah. And then they think something is wrong with them. And then the wisdom of compassion. Yeah, in a way I can't even put into words what that wisdom looks like. And if we are able to be compassionate towards ourselves, we have more freedom, we have more joy in our life. And to me, an aspect of wisdom is joy. And when we can be compassionate to others, we can have more joy in our lives. And then real freedom is when we can begin to see through the illusion of the self, when we can begin to see through all these stories that we have been living in. True wisdom is when we can let go of these identities, when I can let go of this identity of black self, of female self, of writing self, when we can really see through the fabrication of life, because we're living in fictions. All of us are living in a fiction. I mean, recently, I've been chuckling to myself because I grew up in England, but I live in Canada. But the whole thing around the royal families and different royal, who made up this story? I mean, it's the biggest story ever going. But yet we buy into these fictions and we think they're real. Yeah. And so in a way, for me, wisdom is actually dismantling these fabrications. Wisdom is really seeing that there isn't a self, there isn't something fixed, that I am not a fixed being. Yeah, that's wisdom. We all need something, and actually spirituality is such a big term, a big word, because for some people spirituality is the Nike shoe, the designer clothes. For some people spirituality is the rapping. For some people spirituality is the earth and the trees. For some people spirituality is Christianity, Hinduism, Islam, Buddhism. So, and we all need something. We all do need something. Even if we don't believe in something, we're still believing in something. The fact that you don't believe in something is still a belief. And we all need something. I think that in terms of the relationship of spirituality and the modern world, I would say that the modern world has had an impact on spirituality, which is why we're seeing a resurgence of psychedelics. If we go back to the 50s and 60s, which is interesting, I think in the throes of, industrialization in the last century, and then we have people who are wanting to push back against social norms, and also having contact with the Amazon jungle, contact in India. So you see in the 50s and 60s, many Westerners are going out to India to be with the gurus, people like Jack Cornfield, people like Robert Thurman, people like Sharon Salzberg. And then you also have these people who perhaps been to the Amazon jungle, who are really seeking something because, they feel lost. And we see there's a clampdown in the West. We see that Nixon really stops all research around psychedelics. And so psychedelics goes underground. And now again, out of just, if we're seeing what's happening with technology, with artificial intelligence, people are hungry for something. People are wanting an awakening. And to me, it's not a surprise now that actually there's been a real resurgence in psychedelics, also because what we know as in the modern world, it's said that we have far more depression, we have far more anxiety, and so it's believed that things like psychedelics, it's something that can really help with things like depression. So in a way, what I would say is that for me, it's really interesting what's happening in the modern world, because the modern world today, for me, is artificial intelligence. It's the next thing. And what impact is that going to have on spirituality? Or is artificial intelligence going to be the next spirituality? I've been having lunch with my Spanish family here, and just really talking about that. At some point, you know, we've got these glasses which are being made for the immersive experience. So, you know, forget about Zoom, you're going to be able to put this headset on and have this immersive experience. And of course, we know these headsets are going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And at some point, these immersive experience will be giving you the experience of awakening, experience of bliss. And that's going to be people's new spirituality. Forget about the psychedelics, forget about that. It's going to be artificial, intelligence, biohacking. There's so much out there online now for meditation. And so I would say, like, explore on the internet. There's so much. There's Insight Timer, which I have meditations on. There's Round Glass. There's Head Start. There's just numerous apps. And just explore and really see what resonates for you. And then if it's something that actually you think you want more of, again, go onto the internet and see where meditation's been taught locally for you. I mean, you don't even have to leave your house now, and you can do a meditation class. So in a way, I would say, what I would say to you is that actually know that there are times when you meditate and you're just not actually aware of it, because meditation really is about being in the moment of now, here, now. And actually we see children accessing that. You know, it's so interesting that children can be writing or drawing with crayons, and an adult says something to them and they look up and they answer and they come back to what they're doing. So meditation is really noticing that we got distracted and coming back to whatever it is that we're doing. And actually, it may be that we experience that by cleaning our teeth, you know? It may be that we experience it when we have our first warm drink in the morning and you sit down to have that warm drink. It may even be, you know, when somebody has their cigarette, if they're really in the moment of now with the cigarette, they most probably would think, oh my God, this is so disgusting, why do I do it? So in a way, what I want to say is that meditation is your birthright, and just really begin by slowing down and breathing with me now.